change, the ultimate result of the latter is infinitely worse. It's like saying it's too harsh getting up in the morning, why not stay in bed? It's very harsh and dangerous to go out into the street. It's exactly as though you said. In nature, there can be no continuity in nature because they're predators. And in fact, there were some game reserves set up by some well-meaning people who said this is horrible. These poor animals should live constantly under the threat of predators. Those animals subsequently became degenerate and died because predators are a necessary stimulant. And if you eliminate predators in business and just create comfortable bureaucracies and monopolies with no predators, you will have a dead industry. The prosperity of the country will shrivel away, and your people will suffer infinitely more than by being subject to the constant stimulation of threat and competition.
Well, he was a very egotistic type of man. He knew what he wanted. He knew what he wanted to do. And he didn't have great respect for most of the managements that he started to go after. And he thought these companies were sitting ducks, which they turned out to be.
Good management does not stop at the mill door. A company picnic is a common example of industry as a social enterprise. And there's nothing cynical in saying that this pleasant scene of people eating barbecued chicken is a symbol of good business. For good fellowship begets cooperation. And cooperation is what turns out more and better goods, means more sales, more profits, more wages, and more fun for everybody. The highest standard of living in all history has been earned, bought, and paid for by a system in which our vast industrial resources are but the generating force of the greatest social enterprise the world has ever seen.
The big corporation was at the heart of American life. It was far more than just a way of making money. The idea of the corporation had been born 50 years before, out of pressure from politicians. They had wanted to find a way of protecting America from the growing chaos of the free market.
I believe, and I've always believed, and I always will believe, in private enterprise as the backbone of economic well-being in the United States. People of America have no quarrel with business. They insist only that the power of concentrated wealth shall not be abused.
Roosevelt spoke at a time of economic chaos in America. The stock market crash of 1929 had led industrialists to sack millions of their workers. America was torn by riots as workers protested against this ruthlessness. The corporation was deliberately designed to stop it ever happening again. In future, industry would be run by professional managers, not the owners. The managers would not have shares in the business, and they would run it in the interest of everyone involved. The greedy, dangerous power of the shareholders would be controlled by this new structure.
Power passed into the hands, from the hands of one man, there were no women, or not many, passed from the hands of one man into a structure, a bureaucracy. And that is the modern corporation. It is a great bureaucratic apparatus to which I gave the name the Technostructure. The modern corporation is a group exercise, and power depended on position and not stock ownership. The shareholder is an irrelevant fixture. They give the symbolism of ownership and of capitalism, but when it comes to the actual operation of the corporation, as has been agreed for many years, they exercise very little power.
Goldsmith and Milken now set out to take over the technostructure. They would do it by borrowing billions of dollars with the promise that they would repay vast interest. They were confident they could do this because hidden away within the giant corporations was fantastic wealth which they could unlock and sell off. In 1984, Goldsmith and Milken made their first major assault. The Crown-Zellerbach Corporation owned vast forests throughout America. From the timber, they made many of the paper products sold in America and employed thousands of workers. The Zellerbach Corporation was run from San Francisco by an elite group of international managers.
There was a very strong sense of social responsibility, very strong. There was also a sense of power for the sake of power, no question. People love power. Everyone likes to be powerful. And their power was very powerful because it didn't come from the amount of money you got in your bank account or your assets. It came from a whole empire that was there.
Goldsmith and his team went to the Crown-Zellerbach headquarters to make their initial bid. The world they stepped into was the opulent existence of a patrician elite who had run America for 50 years.
They had the most luxurious, lavish facilities that I've ever seen. It was sort of typified by lunchrooms which were presided over by a rather handsome waiter and rather handsome waitresses. And when you went to have lunch, you weren't offered, as you normally were, a drink. You were asked in a rather pompous way what ambiance you would like, which puzzled me at first. And then I found they had some silly machine which you switched on, and you could have the noise of the tide coming in, or you could have autumn rain, or you could have the birds twittering. You know, you could eat your lunch against the background. It was nonsense.
What about the shareholders?
Shareholders are very passive people, as evidenced by the fact very few people sign their proxies. They're either living off it, they're retirees, and they're living off the income, or they're money managers. But there's no direct tie with the company. Look at the attendance to a stockholders' annual meeting as a classic example of they don't really know about the company, or if they do, they believe it's doing well and don't bother to go to the meetings. They're passive holders at all levels.
I think they started by treating us with total contempt, as if this could never happen to them. You had the syndrome of the head of Crown-Zellerbach, I think, probably was reckoned to be a rather godlike figure by about 250,000 people. If you really added up all their present employees, their relatives, their past employees, their pensioners, everything. I mean, he was a big figure in San Francisco. They were sort of impregnable. They were part of the scene. They weren't. And so this was shock treatment. When we first went there, we were treated with contempt. There was nothing to just brush us aside as if we were flies, you know. And so it was a shock when they found that we were serious.
Crown-Zellerbach was no match for the power of the junk bond. Using the borrowed money, Goldsmith simply bought up the shares of the corporation, and there was nothing the managers could do to stop him. Overnight, he became one of the biggest landowners in America. Goldsmith immediately began tearing the corporation apart. He sold off factories and sacked thousands of workers. He did this to pay back the interest. He also made a vast profit for himself. But to the Drexel bankers, it was the reconstruction of America by the power of the market.
Hostile takeover, okay? Hostile to whom, okay? It's not hostile to the shareholders, the owners, okay? It's not hostile to the workers.
Except for those who get sacked.
It's not hostile to them. I wish to God that we'd had a hostile takeover movement in the 50s. We'd still have a steel industry to speak of in the United States of America, okay? We exported all those jobs to Southeast Asia because we wouldn't make the decisions within our corporate structure here. And everybody says, oh, bust up, junk bond, hostile takeover? Give me a break. Wordsmithing. It's not what happened at all. The market works. The economics make it happen, okay?
Goldsmith now became one of the leaders of the hostile takeover movement. Obscure entrepreneurs, guided and funded by Michael Milken, began to take over the old corporations of America. However big the target, Milken was always able to raise more than enough money to snap it up. And as each corporation toppled,